Hello, Thomas. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to you. It's actually a privilege, considering you've been studying these global trends for so many years. And you actually predicted that globalization was inevitable a long time ago. If anything, this pandemic has proved you right. And you describe the globalized world as a world that is flat, fragile, and fast. And we see these trends shifting a little bit during these times, with the world becoming a little less flat, but far more fragile and exponentially faster than before. What are the implications, and how do you see this evolving in the future?
Well, first of all, Paula, thank you very much for having me. It's a treat. I was in Argentina last year for my latest book, and got to interact with a lot of people there in the media and business community, and it was a lot of fun for me. And so I'm happy to be back with you virtually. Let me try to share with you three different perspectives on how I see change happening globally and obviously impacting Argentina. And then we'll have 10 minutes or so for questions. So I'm going to start at the highest level, the atmosphere. Then I'm going to come down to Earth, and then I'm going to come down to a small town in Minnesota. And I hope in all three of these, you'll find trends and patterns that are relevant for you in Argentina. So let's start with the pandemic. How do we think about, how should we think about the pandemic? And the way whenever I talk about it, I always tell a story. On Easter Sunday, the National Public Radio in America did a roundup of pastors' sermons from around America, and a lot of them were devoted to the pandemic. And my favorite was Pastor Michael Curry from National Cathedral, who ended his Easter sermon by singing a little song. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. Now, if you just substitute she for he, she being Mother Nature, you'll understand where we are today. She's got the whole world in her hands. For the first time since 1918, the entire world is facing the same challenge from Mother Nature, this coronavirus pandemic. And unless you were around in 1918, this is the first time for our generation where we all at the same time have faced one of Mother Nature's challenges all across the world. And she throws these challenges at us. They're called germs and viruses and extreme weather and droughts and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes. Mother Nature kind of throws these challenges at us as part of the struggle to determine who is the fittest, who shall get their DNA into the next generation. And what is it that Mother Nature is actually looking for from her plants and animals? What does she and who does she reward? She doesn't reward the smartest. No. She doesn't reward the strongest. No. She actually only rewards the most adaptive. Who can adapt the best, as Darwin taught us, to Mother Nature's latest challenge in this grand struggle to get their DNA into the next generation? And when she assesses, when she tests your adaptation, she really asks three questions to America or Argentina about your adaptation strategy. She says, first, are you humble? Do you respect my virus? Because if you don't, it will hurt you or someone you love. Second, she asks, is, are you coordinated in response to my virus? Because I evolved my virus over millennia to find any crack in your immune system, either your personal immune system or your nation state's immune system. Are you coordinated? And lastly, have you developed your adaptation strategy on chemistry, biology, and physics, on those building blocks, and not politics, ideology, or an election strategy? Because Mother Nature says, I'm just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all I am. You can't say, Mother Nature, we in Argentina, we've been having a tough year. Could you take a year off? No, no, no. She will do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate, and she always bats last, and she always bats 1,000. Do not mess with Mother Nature. Now, if you look around the world, you see three broad approaches to applying adaptation to this coronavirus. The first is China's. China basically said, we're going to take our national surveillance system, which we've developed basically to control our people, and we're going to readapt it to test, track, and trace the virus to control the virus until we get a vaccine that gives us herd immunity. And China's done pretty well using that strategy. Then there are various democratic versions of that strategy: South Korea, Taiwan, New Zealand, some better, some worse. The second approach is Sweden. Sweden basically said, we're going to close our high schools and universities, but we're going to let our K-9 schools stay open. We're going to keep our economy open as possible. We're going to try to protect our most vulnerable. And we're actually going to let our young and healthy go out and acquire the virus naturally. Because this is a virus that hurts a lot of people a little and a few people a lot. So we're going to protect those few people, our elderly and most vulnerable, and we're actually going to let our young and more healthy go out, get the virus, hope they won't require hospitalization, and develop natural herd immunity. And the Swedish strategy has been very controversial, but in the end, it's kind of seems to be working okay. Their economy has really been up and running. The third strategy is the American strategy. We talk like we're going to be China. We're kind of acting now like we want to be Sweden. We're preparing for neither, and we claim to be superior to both. That's basically the Trump strategy. So we locked down haphazardly, and we opened up haphazardly, and now as a result, we've got the virus coming back stronger than ever. Excuse me. So that's, I don't know exactly where Argentina fits in those three buckets, but all I can say is if you are not coordinated, if you are not respecting this virus, and if you're not building your adaptation strategy on chemistry, biology, and physics, not ideology, politics, and an election calendar, Mother Nature will hurt you or someone you love. So let's go down now from the atmosphere to closer to ground level, but at the global perspective. What are the big global trends right now? Well, as I see it, I think of the world in the last 600 years as having gone through three great Promethean moments. Prometheus was the Greek god, you'll recall, who stole fire from a closet in heaven and gave it to human beings to build civilization. The first great Promethean moment was the printing press. The second great Promethean moment was the Industrial Revolution. I think right now, we're actually going through the third great Promethean moment in history. Now, some people have called this the fourth Industrial Revolution. I don't like that title because it implies a continuation from the Industrial Revolution. And I think what's going on today, there's nothing industrial about it. We're actually in a third great Promethean moment. And the reason I got onto this is because I looked around the industrial world, and what did I see? I saw every major political party in the industrial world lately blowing up. I mean, the Tories in England blew up over Brexit. The Labour Party in England went Marxist. The Liberal Party there just disappeared. In America, the Republican Party has become a cult of Trump. The Democrats will probably blow up as soon as they get back into power, assuming they win this election. France is the only country in the world that has a leader today without a party and an opposition without a leader. And I have no clue who governs Italy today. I just know it's not the Christian Democrats. So something's going on. What's going on is that we have governed the world in the industrial democracies, in the Industrial Revolution, with a very stable binary grid, left, right, left, right. Parties were either left or right. And they were divided on this grid of capital versus labor, big government versus small government, high regulation versus low regulation, open to trade, closed to trade, open to immigration, closed to immigration, and in recent years, green versus growth. But something's happening. Something very big is happening that's clearly blowing up all of those parties at the same time. Well, what is it? It's that we're experiencing this, what I call third great Promethean moment. And it's not driven by a printing press. It's not driven by a steam engine. It's actually driven by three simultaneous accelerations, all at the same time, in the three largest forces on the planet, which I call the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law. They are technology, globalization, and climate change, and environmental degradation. If you put all three of them on a graph, what you'll see that they are all in nonlinear acceleration. And what they're doing is that they're making the world what I call fast, fused, and deep. So the pace of change is accelerating everywhere. The world is going from interconnected to interdependent to fused. Things are just getting fused together now. And at the same time, technology is going so deep now, so deep. It can now toggle my DNA. It can now fake your face so well that we decided, all of us together, without anyone ordering it, we decided to suddenly add the word adjective, the adjective deep, in front of everything. Deep fake, deep mind, deep research, deep medicine, deep science. Suddenly we all reach for this word deep. No one ordered it. There's no global dictionary. We all did it intuitively because we sensed that technology was going so deep now to places that were just science fiction 5 years ago. And I'm a big believer in popular culture. So you may have noticed the song that won the Oscars last year by Lady Gaga was called Shallow. But what was the main verse? I'm off the deep end. Watch as I dive in. I'll never reach the ground. Crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. We're far from the shallow now. Oh, Paula, baby, we are far from the shallow now. We're going deep. Well, what happens when the world gets so fast, fused, and deep? What happens is the old left-right way of managing the world can't work anymore. Why? Because everyone needs to be in multiple states at the same time. Multiple states at the same time. So let me give you an example. What happens when the world gets this fast? Well, you may have read about these Hollywood people in America who bribed someone to get their kids into the University of Southern California and Yale and other universities. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. I wanted to call those people and tell them, if you're going to bribe someone to get your kid into a university, you should bribe them to get them into IBM's in-house university, not USC. IBM's in-house university. Why is it? If I showed you IBM's in-house university today, you would say, how do I get my kid into that, not the University of Southern California? What's that about? What that's about is, in the old industrial world that was binary, I government educated, you business employed. But when the pace of change starts to accelerate this fast, what if IBM says, I can't wait for you anymore to educate? I can't wait for you to figure out what's going on. The pace of change is too fast. I need to build my own in-house university based not on just in case learning. We're going to teach you this just in case you might need it, but based on just in time learning, where I can download a new learning app for exactly the skill that I need. At IBM, you're in a job now. I went up there to test this. They just took my bio, they put it into a computer. It spit out the 4 jobs in IBM that I could apply for using artificial intelligence. People in those jobs get regular notices saying, 4 other people doing your job are taking this new course. And by the way, we estimate your job's life is only about 18 months more. In a world of fast change, the old binary model was first I learn, then I work. Okay? Now the new model, as my teacher Heather McGowan likes to say, is going to be work, learn, work, learn, work, learn, work, learn. You're going to have to work in order to learn, not learn in order to work. You're going to have to be in multiple states at the same time. I, as an employer, need to be employer and educator, and you, as my employee, need to be employee and student all at the same time. Okay? That's the implications of fast. Now let's look at a world that's this fused. What happens when the world gets this fused? Well, and it's getting fused because of partly climate change. We're all now experiencing the same climate pressures, and it's getting fused by technology and globalization. Who in America knew that between December 2019 and March 2020, there were 3,200 flights from China to America? 3,200. There were 50 flights from Wuhan to America. How many Americans had even heard of Wuhan before the coronavirus appeared? Now, the world is getting fused now. Now, when it gets this fused, you get a situation that a company like Qualcomm suddenly finds itself in. So Qualcomm made the chips and software inside your iPhone or whatever phone you're using probably. So Qualcomm has a relationship with Huawei, China's now famous 5G global telecom company. This is Huawei's relationship, Qualcomm's relationship with Huawei. For Qualcomm, Huawei is their customer, their supplier, their partner, their competitor, and their shared global standard setter. Qualcomm and Huawei have 5 different relationships. Suddenly along comes Donald Trump with a binary view of the world. He says, look, China, enemy now. America, a friend, enemy, friend, black, white. You, Qualcomm, you need to adjust to that. You can't be doing business with Huawei like that. Qualcomm says, wait a minute. We are fused. They're my customer, partner, supplier, competitor, and shared standard setter. Because in a fused world, suddenly everything becomes dual use as a military and civilian application. And in that world, in a world that's fused, when you try to impose the old binary relationship on it, you get this huge problem now for all these global companies. What about deep? Deep. So here's an example of deep and its implications. I was in Israel last February, and I ran into Amnon Shashua, who runs Mobileye, the Israeli self-driving car company that was bought by Intel. Because Intel is going to be a car company. Yeah, the chip maker. They're going to be a self-driving car company. They're going to compete with General Motors and Tesla. And so they bought Mobileye, the Israeli self-driving car company, for $18 billion. Talk about fused. Suddenly Intel, the chip maker, is going to be competing with General Motors. So I ran into Amnon, and he said, have you ever driven in a self-driving car? I said, I was just in Mountain View, California, and I took a trip on Google's Waymo in their self-driving vehicle. And it was great. He said, Mountain View, forget about Mountain View. Try driving a self-driving car in Jerusalem where there are no 2 parallel streets. I said, I'd like to try that. I went up there. We drove in Mobileye's car all through Jerusalem. Crazy hairpin turns, camels, donkeys, rabbis, Arabs, all kinds of things. And this car is self-driving through the streets of Jerusalem. We got done, and he told me an interesting story. To develop and test a self-driving car, you actually need a protocol, an insurance protocol that determines what is safe self-driving. Otherwise, anything you hit in a self-driving car or anything that hit you, you would get sued and you wouldn't be able to develop the vehicle. So the rabbis who run Jerusalem had no idea about this. So Mobileye created a coalition, an ecosystem with Volkswagen, who provides their car, Mobileye, the people who run Jerusalem, and the Israeli Ministry of Transportation. And together, they, as an ecosystem, developed the insurance protocol for self-driving cars in Israel. It turns out to have been so good that Yandex, Russia's Google, now tests their self-driving cars in Israel. And China just took the whole self-driving insurance protocol from Israel, translated into Chinese, and made it their insurance platform as well. So what happened there? Mobileye realized that when the world is this, when technology is going this deep, it had gone so deep, the old system didn't work. Because what was the old system? The old system was I government regulate, you business innovate. But what if the innovator is so deep now that the government regulator has no idea what the innovator's doing? How can he possibly regulate it? So we had a scene here a couple of years ago where Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook was being interviewed or interrogated by a group of senators. And one of those senators, Orrin Hatch from Utah, said to him, Mr. Zuckerberg, if you give your product away for free, how do you make money? The regulator had no clue how the innovator made money. We had some leaked emails in the New York Times from Boeing, and they were very interesting.
Okay.
A Boeing engineer was talking about his FAA regulator. And he said, for me, watching my FAA regulator, watching me, is like watching dogs watching television. Like watching dogs watching television. So we have a complete mismatch now. Technology is going deep, so deep that the government regulator no longer knows even where you are. So unless you create an ecosystem to provide governance and regulation, you're never going to get there. So just to summarize this point, what's basically happening in the world around governance is the same thing that's happening in computing. So computing is going from classical computing to quantum computing. So classical computing is binary. It's built on ones and zeros, ones and zeros, ones and zeros, going back and forth. It's like flipping a coin. And if you can flip a coin 1 billion times on a computer chip, a transistor, you get compute and storage. Quantum computing is like spinning a coin. You can be in multiple states at the same time. And what I'm arguing is that the reason all of these left-right parties are blowing up is because to govern today's world, the only way you can do it is through ecosystems, collaborative ecosystems that bring all the parties together around a table. The old left-right, I government regulate, you business innovate, I government educate, you business employ, those old binaries don't work anymore. You have to be in multiple states at the same time. And if you look around the world today, you'll notice 3 countries that have done very well in the pandemic. And what they have, they're called New Zealand, Germany, and Austria. And what the 3 of them have in common is they all 3 have what are called now black-green governments. So the government in New Zealand today is the Labour Party, a right-wing anti-immigration party, and the Greens. The government in Austria is actually a right-wing party and Greens. The government in 3 German states, and probably soon to replace Merkel's coalition, is a coalition between right-wing parties and Greens. They're called black-green coalitions. And I think they're the spear, they're the tip of the spear of where politics is growing. It's going to be a breakdown of these right-left parties. They'll be around for a while, but it's going to be a breakdown of these, and we're going to see these much more adaptive coalitions. Okay, we've done 30,000 feet. We've done 1,000 feet. Now let's go local. I'm going to use a very tiny example of a small town in Minnesota to show you how this gets applied in real politics. So I'm from Minneapolis. I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And in
No entro.
1949, my aunt and
No
uncle
tengo preguntas.
moved from Minnesota to a little town 2 hours away west called Wilmer, Minnesota. Wilmer, Minnesota. And they started a little steel company there. And at the time, Wilmer was 99.999% white, Protestant, Catholic, Scandinavian, and German immigrants, and actually 3 Jewish families, one of whom was my aunt and uncle. They were the diversity in town. Okay. And I went to Wilmer for 50 years to visit my aunt and uncle, so I had a lot of depth perception about that
No
community.
funciona.
In around 1975, my aunt came down to Minneapolis one day, and she took me aside, and she said, "Tom, I was in the grocery store on Saturday, and I heard someone speaking Spanish. Spanish. For her, it could have been Martian. Okay? She never forgot it, and I never forgot it. Well, my aunt and uncle passed away about 10 years ago, and someone happened to come see me from Minneapolis about a year and a half ago now, and it turned out she worked in Wilmer. And I actually made an arrangement for her. I said, if I give you a free lecture, will you set up a day for me in Wilmer, Minnesota? She said, a deal. So I went out to Wilmer with her, and our first stop was Wilmer High School, only one high school, main high school. And we go into the lobby, and there's a giant world steel map over the lobby, and the principal of the school explains that they begin every school year with the students taking out a ladder, climbing up to that world map, and they put pins in the 30 different countries that are now represented by Wilmer's senior class. Wilmer, Minnesota today, a town that in 1949 was 100% white Protestants, Scandinavian and German. Wilmer, Minnesota today is 50% Latino and Somali. Latino and Somali, okay? That is an accelerating change, okay? So, and that map over the lobby was made by the people who bought my aunt and uncle's steel company. How's Wilmer doing? Wilmer's actually doing pretty well. Why is Wilmer doing okay? And this really is defining who is succeeding today at the local level and who isn't in America. Wilmer's doing well today because they have created what I call a complex adaptive coalition to manage all the change happening around them. You know, in nature, when climate change happens, the ecosystems that survive all have created complex adaptive networks where all the parts of the network together to maximize their resilience and propulsion. Well, the same has happened in Wilmer and all these towns in America that are doing well. What they all have in common is they created complex adaptive coalitions. So how did all this work? Well, the first thing that Wilmer was able to produce was inclusion, a sense of inclusion. You know, we say in English, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, necessity is also the mother of inclusion. Because what happened in Wilmer was all the young people were leaving. So they needed foreign labor. They needed Latino immigrants coming in, and they needed the Somalis. Now, some towns couldn't handle that diversity, but Wilmer could. Wilmer was able to handle that diversity originally, I would argue, out of necessity. Because if you don't have workers, when a worker shows up, whether they are Latino, whether they are Somali, whether they are Hmong from, Cambodia or wherever, you just ask one question as a boss. One question. It's, will you sit up, wake up, dress up, clean up, show up, and shut up? If you will show up to work and be a responsible person, you can have a job in Wilmer today. And I don't care who you sleep with, what language you speak, or what God you pray to. So the need for foreign labor just broke through all the cultural and religious resistance. That's the first thing that happened there. Second thing that happened there was that the towns, and this is the most important point, Wilmer had a high number of leaders without authority. Leaders without authority. Leaders without authority are the most important leaders in the world. They were people in Wilmer who just stepped up and said, not going to happen here. My town is going to make the change. So in Wilmer's case, for instance, on the first Ramadan, the Somalis had nowhere to pray. There was no mosque in Wilmer, Minnesota. So the fire chief let them use the fire department as their mosque. Some people in Wilmer didn't like that. Someone threw a pork chop at a Somali woman. But the fire chief said, no, these are our new neighbors. Leaders without authority, people who step up and say, not going to happen here. We are not going to fail. Not in Wilmer, not in Argentina, nowhere. Number three, in all of these communities, the leaders without authority then come together and form a coalition, a complex adaptive coalition where the business community partners with the education community, partners with the philanthropic community, partners with the social entrepreneur community, partners with the local government, and they build an ecosystem of governance to adapt and manage to the change. Lastly, they get social entrepreneurs and companies to invest in their complex adaptive coalition. So what happened in Wilmer? The biggest healthcare company in the state of Minnesota, called Blue Cross Blue Shield, basically came to Wilmer and invited different leaders in the town to host dinners at their home. And anyone could sign up to go to a dinner at anybody's home and raise what are the things we need for our community most. And then each dinner nominated someone for a city dinner, and they voted on the 19 projects they wanted for their town. And Blue Cross Blue Shield, biggest healthcare company in Minnesota, or one of the biggest, then came in and spent almost $250,000 funding these 19 projects for 2 years in a row. One of them was a project to create a daycare center for elderly and infants together. One was to help Somali women identify autism better, which they didn't understand. Projects like that. So I called up Blue Cross Blue Shield. I said, why did you do that? $250,000. They said, Tom, healthy communities have healthy people. Healthy communities have healthy people, and our healthcare costs go down. So that in miniature, what happened in Wilmer, unfortunately, I wish I could tell you it was happening in Washington, D.C. It's not, okay? Because it requires a high degree of trust. One of my teachers, Dov Seidman, likes to say, trust is the only legal performance-enhancing drug. Trust is the only legal performance-enhancing drug. Where you have high trust, you can build complex adaptive coalitions, these ecosystems, to manage change. And so to conclude, in the world we're going into, in a world that's getting fast, fused, and deep, every day, faster, more fused, and deeper, the communities, the states, the countries that are going to thrive will be those who are able to create these broad ecosystems, collaborative ecosystems to manage the change, complex adaptive coalitions. Those will be the countries that I believe rise and thrive in the third great Promethean moment.
Very clear, wonderful concepts. You really set us thinking about so many things, and let us help us look at them with a different light, in a completely different light.
Thank you.
What I hear from your last comments is that what we need to do is create an ecosystem, of collaborative ecosystem, and it seems like what you're saying is this comes kind of from the bottom up. It's like it's communities at the level of the small town and who really know their needs and have trust to build these alliances that will probably do it first and do it faster. And what do you think leaderships at every level, but especially at the level of governments, should be learning from these experiences? And what would be your recommendation if you could talk to them?
Yeah, it's an important question, Paul. And it's really leaders who can be coalition builders and think horizontally less than top down, because it's not going to be just top down. It's not going to be just bottom up. It's not going to be side to side. It's going to be all those directions at once. And the best leaders are those who can build the trust to bring these kind of coalitions and networks together. That really is, I think, what's going to set apart one country, Paula, from another, one community from another, and one company for another. Leaders who can bring these coalitions together. Because the old days of just me regulating, you educating, me educating, you employing, me regulating, you innovating, it just doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work anymore. And that's why these parties, I can tell you just in America, they've really just become identity tribes. That's all they are. Is there which party in America stands for enabling more countries to do their own internal education systems? Well, that's not a left-right issue. I mean, it's a side-to-side issue. It's neither left nor right. Yet, if you're a company in America today, that's an essential issue. It's no longer tax, no tax. It's how do you enable these companies to adapt in a fast, fused, and deep world? And that takes a very different kind of politics. And it fights against our traditional left-right politics. And that's why I point to these black-green coalitions appearing now in Germany and New Zealand, in Austria. It's very interesting. Well, Germany's not so small, but in these smaller, very rapidly adapting countries, that's what they're doing. You look at Singapore, you look at countries that are really thriving today. They all have different versions of these coalitions. And by the way, the towns in America, I wish I could tell you every town in America was like Wilmer. It's not. 40 minutes down the road from Wilmer is a town called St. Cloud. The Somalis call it White Cloud because it can't handle diversity, can't handle inclusion. And if you can't handle diversity and inclusion in today's world, you are not going to survive as a small town in America today. You will not have the employees.
Fine. Connected with this, you have talked very powerfully about creative destruction as a very powerful tool to actually reinvent an organization, a purpose, and really grow where before maybe there was decline. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And do you think that would be an opportunity for a crisis-ridden country like Argentina with a relatively little importance in the world?
Well, I think what's going to happen, Paul, because of the pandemic, we are going to see a period of creative destruction. I think could be unprecedented in the history of the world. Just think about what we're doing right now. I'm giving a lecture in Argentina from my office in Bethesda, Maryland. And this has become the new normal. That is creating and destroying a whole framework of how we do lectures and deliver education. But now imagine this. We're now in a world where more people have cheap tools of innovation like Zoom than ever before. More people have access to incredibly powerful computing through the cloud than ever before. More people have access to cheap money, zero interest rates basically, than ever before. And there are more problems out there to solve than ever before. You put those four together and you're going to see an explosion of innovation. And what a country like Argentina wants to be is a place that is incredibly hospitable to high IQ risk takers. Those people who want to do that innovation, hospitable for its own people, making starting a company incredibly easy, getting the capital for that, and even being a platform where taking advantage of Argentina's amazing environment and natural beauty, saying, hey, we are open. Come here in a world where you can be anywhere. Why not be in Argentina? We have amazing mountains. We have amazing lakes. We have amazing rivers. We have amazing landscape. If you can be anywhere, why go to Montana? Why not come to Argentina? We'll provide you the high-speed bandwidth. We'll provide you the legal framework. We might even provide you access to seed capital. Come here, come hither from wherever you are in Latin America or from anywhere in the world. That's what's going to happen. Because basically, I've been out of the New York Times. We closed our office on I think March 12th, something like that. We've already been told we're not coming back until July 20th, 2021. Okay. So I can actually write my column from Buenos Aires or Bethesda. They really don't care. Yeah. Maybe I should come to BA. What are you offering? Okay. Why not? And maybe if I come to BA, I'll start a little newspaper on the side, or I'll learn something, or I'll get to know Argentinian innovators. This is a great chance for a country like Argentina for a reset, a restart. But you have to start always by asking the question, what world am I living in? What are the biggest trends in this world? And how does my country take advantage of them? People who, don't think about the future tend not to do well there, and so you have to have your thinking cap on. What are the big trends? And why don't we start, in some amazing, beautiful spot in Argentina, the Argentina, innovation hub, and invite the world. I promise you, people will come.
Well, great message. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you here during this colloquium. A great start of the conversations with this global trends view that you have provided. So
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thanks for having me.